Sunday morning, 10:47 a.m. Pastor Michael Harrison is 23 minutes into what he considers his finest sermon on abundance theology when the sanctuary doors burst open. A homeless man staggers down the center aisle, clothes torn, smelling of 3 days on the street and desperation. The congregation holds its collective breath. Michael pauses mid-sentence, his carefully crafted message about God's provision hanging in the air like incense while reality walks toward him in ripped shoes and unwashed hair. "Excuse me?" the man calls out, his voice cutting through the reverent silence. "Is this where they talk about loving your neighbor?" You know that moment, don't you? When the comfortable distance between theology and reality collapses, when the abstract becomes incarnate, when God shows up in the most inconvenient form possible. When your sermon about abundance meets someone who hasn't eaten in 2 days. Michael had spent hours polishing this sermon. 3 biblical passages, 2 compelling illustrations, 1 carefully crafted call to action about financial stewardship. Everything designed to challenge the congregation's comfort without actually threatening it. But standing before him now is James Rodriguez, 43 years old, laid off from the factory 6 months ago, evicted last week, sleeping in his car until it was repossessed 3 days ago. "I was walking by," James continues, his voice growing stronger, "and I heard something about God caring for people. I was wondering if that includes people like me." The sanctuary is so quiet, you can hear the air conditioning humming. 700 people watching their pastor navigate the gap between pulpit proclamation and sidewalk reality. Michael's first instinct is damage control, gentle deflection. "Sir, we'd love to help you after the service. If you could just wait in the lobby." But something in James's eyes stops him. Not desperation exactly, but a kind of fierce hope. The look of someone who's walked 12 blocks because he heard there might be good news here. Someone who's betting his last ounce of faith on the possibility that Jesus actually meant what he said. In the book of Acts, there's a story that terrifies most pastors. Peter and John are heading to the temple for afternoon prayers when a lame man asks them for money. They could have given him a coin and continued their religious routine. Instead, Peter does something revolutionary. He stops, he looks, he engages. "I have no silver or gold, but what I have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, stand up and walk." The healing that follows causes such a commotion that it interrupts the entire temple system. The religious leaders are furious. This wasn't how things were supposed to work. Miracles were supposed to be orderly, scheduled, contained within appropriate theological boundaries. Michael looks at James, then at his congregation, then at the sermon notes that suddenly feel like props in a play he no longer wants to perform. "You know what?" Michael says, setting his notes aside. "Yes, this is where we talk about loving our neighbor. And you're our neighbor." He steps down from the pulpit and walks toward James. "What's your name?" "James." "James, when's the last time you ate?" "Thursday." Michael turns to his congregation. "This is James. He's hungry. He needs help. We've been talking about God's abundance for 23 minutes. James is giving us the chance to practice it." What happens next transforms everything, not just for James, but for the entire congregation. Sarah, a single mother in the third row, stands up. "James, I work at the diner downtown. I can get you a job if you're willing to work." Then Tom, the insurance agent who's been tithing faithfully for 15 years but has never felt his faith was real. "I have a studio apartment. It's furnished. You can stay there while you get back on your feet." Then Margaret, the retired nurse, and "James, you look like you could use medical attention. I still have connections at the clinic." One by one, the congregation transforms from audience to participants, from consumers of religious programming to embodied expressions of divine love. 6 months later, James Rodriguez is the head of maintenance at the church. Not because they found him a charity job, but because he's exceptionally skilled at fixing things that are broken. "That Sunday changed my life," James reflects during his baptism, but not because Pastor Michael preached a great sermon, because he stopped preaching and started living what he'd been talking about. Sometimes God has to interrupt our theology to teach us about his heart. Michael learned something that morning that seminary had never taught him: that the most powerful sermons aren't preached from pulpits. They're lived in moments when divine love encounters human need and refuses to look away. "I had been preaching about God's abundance," he tells his denominational conference months later, "but I was treating it like a theological concept instead of a lived reality." James didn't interrupt my sermon, he completed it. He showed us what abundance actually looks like when it becomes incarnate. Jesus specialized in sacred interruptions. His entire ministry was essentially one long interruption of religious business as usual. He interrupted the temple money changers. He interrupted the stoning of an adulteress. He interrupted funeral processions and turned them into resurrection celebrations. He understood that sometimes divine love has to disrupt human systems to remind us what we're actually here for. Tonight, maybe your comfortable routines are being interrupted by someone's desperate need. Maybe your theological theories are being challenged by incarnate reality. Maybe God is trying to speak to you through the voice you least want to hear. Maybe the interruption isn't the obstacle to your spiritual life. Maybe it is your spiritual life. Because the God who became flesh doesn't just speak through sermons and prayers and properly scheduled religious activities. Sometimes he speaks through the homeless man who walks down your aisle, through the desperate phone call that comes during dinner, through the person whose crisis becomes your calling, through the sacred interruption that transforms your Sunday performance into Monday reality. The question isn't whether you'll be interrupted. The question is whether you'll recognize the interruption as invitation. To stop talking about love and start living it. To stop preaching abundance and start practicing it. To let God complete your sermon through your life.